Welcome to A Place of Yes, a podcast about how I moved through my darkest hour. And for me, that was in channeling my grief into good. Welcome to the show. Hi, welcome to A Place of Yes. We are in between seasons, so each week we are dropping little extra episodes, and this one is never before heard excerpts from our conversation with Mike Billock. We loved that episode, and we really loved that conversation. But since he was part of an episode that had a lot of board members, we really wanted to showcase some of the things that got clipped. So when I talked with Mike, we shared a lot of our past history. So before he was a board member at Jake's Help from Heaven, we were just, a set of parents with kids the same age at elementary school. Our kids played on the same baseball team, and we just got to know each other in the way that parents do, and specifically in the way moms do. So his wife died at the age of 42 very suddenly. The whole thing was, 3 or 4 months. And it was a pretty devastating time, obviously for him and his family, but for the community. And we talk about a lot of that. We talk about her last days, and we talk about really how he deals with grief and how we all deal with grief. Kim was diagnosed mesothelioma. Can you talk a little bit about that journey? Because that came, at least in my perspective on the outside, it came pretty quick.
So it started in the summer of 2014, and it just started with fatigue. Like throughout the course of the summer, she just sort of felt like she couldn't, she was sleeping a decent amount at night, but just was still always tired. And it went to the doctors, I think, for that, and they said, oh, we think you're anemic, and gave her some iron. And then near the end of August, beginning of September, she started throwing up a little bit.
Okay.
And then they thought, well, iron can be difficult on your stomach, and, we'll give you this for indigestion and et cetera. Okay. And then she kept throwing up, and she was not feeling well kind of by that time, beginning of September. Went to the doctors, and they did a x-ray, and we figured it out. You have pneumonia. So
I was going to say, I thought pneumonia. I remember talking to her outside of Lake Ave, and I was going to say pneumonia. I thought that was one of the...
So they gave her an antibiotic, and, it didn't really help, and she kind of kept throwing up, and they thought, well, that's also due to antibiotics, et cetera. And kind of went through the month of September going back and forth to the doctors trying to figure out what was going on. It wasn't until the beginning of October, it was very close to the time of her birthday, and had another x-ray, and like, okay, this hasn't cleared up, this pneumonia hasn't cleared up, so we'll send you for a CT. And that's when they said, okay, it's lung cancer. We found a mass in your lung, and we found another mass in your abdomen, so it spread. It progressed so quickly. And during all this time, she was like throwing up, and she couldn't really eat or keep anything down. And so we had a week where she went into the hospital kind of doing fluids and sustenance that way. But really from the beginning of October, she couldn't keep anything down. And to make a very long story, like I said, it happened quickly, but the mass in her abdomen had grown so large that it basically cut off her intestines. The food couldn't get through.
Oh, my God. Okay.
And
was she in pain?
Yes. The pain kind of started around that time. She was when we went to the hospital. In order for her to leave the hospital, like I had to learn how to provide pain medications through a PICC line and things of that nature, and to do the food. Then we got the diagnosis. Initially, it was a different type of cancer, and then we had it sent out to another, the Yale Cancer Center, and they figured out it was mesothelioma, and we started chemo. But mesothelioma generally is a very, it's always fatal. And we were looking at miracle cases where people had lived 5 years.
But you try to be like optimistic, and
exactly.
You try to find the light.
We're doing the chemo. We will arrest this kind of progression and beat it and try to fight it. The combination of the cancer and the chemo and not being able to eat for several months. Like I said, she had the CT scan. It was the middle of October, and she passed away 3 months later in January. So it was, it progressed very fast. Quickly.
There's so much that does work in our healthcare system, and that so much that does work with doctors and I think at any point in this journey, you sort of have to stay positive. You can't let yourself get too dark, because once you're dark, it's endless, right? Like it's harder and harder to get out. But an overlapping theme that I just heard from you and that I heard from Melissa and that I just hear from our families is this, you can't help but think, or I can't help but think, what if they had taken it more seriously right from the get-go? And you understand kind of why they can't right away. Hindsight is 20/20, right? Like, if they knew then what they knew in October, then obviously they would have done things differently. And I think about, there's a lot of talk in sort of the rare disease community and about, a diagnosis and the power of a diagnosis, and sometimes you get the diagnosis too late. Sometimes, like in Jake's case, you never get the diagnosis. And it's hard to know what you should be doing if you don't know what it is. Your case and my case, different stories, but we had the means in which to, and we had a community in which supported us. And sometimes we work with families that just don't have that support or the community or the ability to ask for second opinions, or, that just don't even know that you can.
Absolutely. We relied on neighbors and friends of ours, one that worked at Yale. We wouldn't have known it was mesothelioma if he hadn't kind of talked us through the process of, no, here's what you do, and you take the pathology and you want to send it to a major cancer center because they see so many more cases than the local places do. And I mean, who knows that? Who knows that?
And especially when you're in the middle of it, right? Like, it's very easy, like outside, to be like, oh, if this ever happened to me, this is what I would do. But when you're in the middle of it, and, I remember with Jake, sometimes I couldn't think about those things because, frankly, I was just trying to keep him alive. And I'm having a hard time figuring out the right wording of this question, but I think people handle grief differently, right? Like, some people, I have always tried, and Brian has tried, to really take our grief, and the whole theme of the show is, channeling grief for good. I sometimes think that sounds better than what it actually looked like, because it didn't always look this way. Like, grief is horrible. Like, it can look really dark and it can look really sad and it can just be hard. But at the end of the day, you're always, in my opinion, you're going to feel that way, right? Like, you feel that way regardless, so you might as well try to do it in a sort of positive way. And I feel like you certainly have done that as well. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like after Kim passed? Loaded question. Yeah.
Yes.
Just a casual question.
I mean, the first year, it's a blur. I mean, you go through the first few days, and I just found that if I just focused on what I had to do then I could do it. Yeah. If I stopped to think about anything, I was going to stay stopped. Yeah. Right. So just focus on what had to be done. And I do remember, you have within the first few days, everybody's there and everybody's in town. And then
there's that quiet.
There's that quiet afterwards. That was very hard. I would say, if not for having to take care of the kids, I probably would not have gotten out of bed most days. Yeah. That was my focus, I think, at least for just to mechanically move and do what I had to do for them. To be there for them, not just take care of them, make sure we're going to school and stuff, but be there for them. When people say I'm sorry, they mean it, and it's helpful, but it's somebody who says I know, right? Yeah. And everybody's, even if they lost somebody's also lost a spouse, or they've also lost a child, it's not exact, but it's closer.
But it's that it's that. Like Angela and I talked about, like, just that hole, you know what I mean? Like, you can just, it's almost like it can make you not able to breathe sometimes, And
I did, I can't remember who had told me about it. I think it was Anna Maria, about a grief support group, and I went to actually met Mark at that.
Okay.
Seeing people, like, at different stages of their journeys. And that was helpful too, because in terms of, like I said, they know they had lost a spouse as well, and people were coping with it in different ways. Yeah. And you kind of see, okay, I like the way this person's coping with it. This I don't want to do that, right?
We had that same experience where I was like, okay, look at them, like they are still they're plugging along, and you kind of reference it, like you didn't just want to be the kid's dad, like mechanically, you wanted to like help them and be like,
right.
They
are going
what
through,
they needed.
They're going through something awful and horrible that I also don't quite understand.
Because it's a different dynamic
too. I
too.
lost my wife, they lost their mom, and as much as I want to understand, and they were
all at different ages and different relationships, and Do you talk to her?
I do.
Do you talk out loud or in your head?
A mix of both. Mix of both.
This is like my new obsessive question because I like have always talked out loud to Jake. I'm always curious as to how that plays out for people.
Yeah, I might start out loud and then I realize I've stopped out loud and
but you're in your head.
Head. Yeah.
Yep. No, I would say I probably do a combo as well. So when you were in that period of time with Kim, what was your relationship like? Because I think that sometimes, right, you're sort of starting to figure out where this is going. And Kim likely is not feeling great a lot of the time. But what was she like?
Once chemo started, we were kind of in and out of the hospital with possible infection, and she'd get like a fluid buildup in her abdomen sometimes, and sometimes with the pain. But it was always, okay, we're going to have the chemo, and a few weeks later we'll have the next chemo, and we'll have a PET scan, and
in between, see what's happening.
And we're going to beat this thing. And there was one point where she, with the pain she was in, she was not the drugs that she had and were kind of taking a toll.
Okay.
In the pain medication, and we went into the hospital. It was the night of Christmas, and she was kind of not herself, and she was not feeling well, and she was in a lot of pain. Up until then, like we'd been like, okay, we're gonna beat this, and that's when we went into the ER in the hospital, and I talked with the oncologist, and he told me he thought it was going to be a few more weeks, and it was very difficult. I went home and talked with the kids that night.
On Christmas, no less.
Well, it was
probably not. Okay.
That was the next night. We went in on Christmas night on the 25th. We were there the whole day on 26th, and it was the night of the 26th that I was told that. And then and Kim was still very out of it. I'd wanted to talk with her about it, and she had not wanted to talk about it because we're going to focus on getting better, right? And I remember she had she got some blood transfusions and started feeling a little better and started being a little more with it. And when she was, I was like, oh, she's like, and I was kind of like, can I talk to you about these things? And she was like, no. And then in very Kim fashion, she was like, okay, we will. And I remember it was like December 29th. She was like, we will talk about it. We bring the priest in and we'll talk about it. And then we will not talk about it again. And,
And that is how it shall be.
And that is how it shall be. And so he came in and we talked about it, and it was like, yep, here's if this happens, we'll take these plans and we'll put them in a file cabinet and not use them for decades. But the conversation was really just about funeral planning, and I wanted to ask her a lot more questions about things that she wanted for the kids or anything like that. And she was like, after the discussion about just planning the funeral, was like, nope, I'm going to have the next chemo and that'll be fine. And then she really, it was very soon after that she kind of lost a lot of lucidity and had,
She was in the hospital during this time.
She was in the hospital during this time, and she was, I won't say dementia, but it was, I guess, the equivalent.
Yeah.
And it was, and the doctors explained, look, the cancer's taking a toll on her body, the chemo's taking a toll, all these drugs have taken a toll. And so sometimes she would think that, there was a party outside, and why weren't we invited? And sometimes she thought she was talking with people in the room that weren't there. There was once, it was beautiful, where she was like, why do we get married? And
she really still liked you.
Yes. And we were planning the wedding, and I was just suggesting all these things that we had done at our wedding. And she was like, that's a great idea, So,
oh, Mike.
Yeah.
That is beautiful.
And then she had a respiratory arrest and went into the ICU, and she was in the ICU for, it wasn't long, about a week and a half or so. But, I had wanted to talk to her more about what she would have wanted for the kids. And it was hard because, for a while, I was wishing we had. And it took me a while to be like,
she trusts you. Yeah.
Yeah. And what could she have said? I'd like Maddie to go to this college, or, I guess not a lot more needed to be said.
No, and I suspect, and I don't know this, but if you are choosing to believe that you are going to fight it, then you can't simultaneously have the conversation if you're not.
Yes. And at the same time, I found out years later, like talking with her mom, that
She did.
She had conversations with her mom about watching out for the kids after she was gone, you know. So, and part of it was she didn't want to have that conversation because she probably didn't want me to be upset.
Yeah, till the very end.
Well, I will say it was one of the times she was in the hospital, I think in December, and she had a roommate, and her roommate, like, couldn't move her arms and legs. And her roommate was, I'm trying to think if she was like in her 30s or 40s, and she she had a congenital issue. She couldn't really talk. She just kind of couldn't move her arms and legs. And Kim was like, I'm 42. I can't complain. And that was the thing, is like that. Her nurses and everybody would come in and ask her how she's doing, and she's like, she would not complain.
How are you?
Yeah, she would not complain. And she would like want to see how they were doing and talk about their lives. And so
she was special.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that's kind of a nice way to wrap up. Thank you so much, Mike, for being on the show. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to A Place of Yes. Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you really like this episode, please share it with a friend, anybody who might benefit from listening to this. It would make a world of difference if we could just reach more people and share the work that we do and the stories we want to tell. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave us a thumbs up or leave us a comment. We would appreciate all that you can do. If you really like this episode, please share it with a friend or two.